2 days of severe weather are coming, and this could impact the World Cup for Monday and Tuesday, and even later this week, as we're expecting the risk for extremely dangerous heat, widespread flash flooding, widespread wind damage, a couple large to very large hailstones, and a few tornadoes being possible in the northern parts of the country. So I'm going to break down everything that you need to know so that you can stay safe and you can stay weather aware as we roll through this week here after the 4th of July. So let's get right into the forecast. Jumping right into our categorical outlook, you will see in the mid-Atlantic, we do have a marginal 1 out of 5 risk in place with a smaller 2 out of 5 slight risk in there where the primary threat is going to be wind damage. Down in Arkansas and Louisiana, we also have a marginal 1 out of 5 risk in that region, mostly for wind damage as well. But as we go into the northern Midwest, through the northern plains, and even back towards the Great Basin, you will see that we do have a large marginal 1 out of 5 risk yet again in place, mostly for wind damage as well. But into the northern Midwest, especially for Minnesota and clipping parts of the Dakotas, we are looking at the risk for an isolated tornado or two, plus the risk for some large to very large hail. Our tornado probabilistic outlook is going to echo the same thing with just a 2% risk up here for northwestern Minnesota, as well as clipping part of North Dakota. Our wind outlook is where things get a little bit spicier today, as we do have a 5% risk with a 15% risk in the middle for Virginia out here in the mid-Atlantic. Down in the south, we are looking at Arkansas and Louisiana with that 5% risk, where just some isolated wind damage is possible. And then all the way through the Great Basin, back through the northern Midwest, again, we are looking at that large 5% region. But that 15% area for northwestern Minnesota and clipping the Dakotas is definitely going to be the primary concern for severe weather this evening. Our hail outlook is where things get the most interesting, as we do have a SIG 1 risk in place up for northwestern Minnesota, as well as clipping part of North Dakota. And you'll see that 15% risk for large to very large hail is in place as well. So that hatched region is where we're most concerned about that large to very large, perhaps even giant size hail, baseball size or higher, as we get into northwestern Minnesota. Down in Arkansas and Louisiana, you'll see another 5% risk is in place, as well as most of southern Montana, as well as northern Wyoming. In those areas, isolated hailstones that produce damage are definitely going to be possible. Tuesday is when our tornado threat is actually going to ramp back up a little bit. But for our categorical outlook, we will have a marginal risk in place back in the mid-Atlantic for Virginia and North Carolina as well. And then down in eastern Texas, as well as part of northern Louisiana, you'll see a marginal risk is in place there as well. But as we go back to the northern plains and even the Midwest and parts of the central plains, we're going to see a very large marginal risk with also a pretty large slight risk that you're seeing in yellow there for South Dakota and Minnesota put in place. So definitely a slightly more widespread severe weather event expected on Tuesday. For Tuesday's tornado risk, we do just have a 2% region outlined here for South Dakota and Minnesota. I'm expecting that region to grow a little bit and perhaps get upgraded to a 5% risk, which you would see in brown tomorrow if you look at our outlooks on our website. This is definitely going to be an area of concern for tomorrow. Our wind outlook is going to include some more widespread areas as well, back through the mid-Atlantic, that 5% region, back into Texas and Louisiana, another 5% region. And then as we go back towards the plains in the Midwest, you will see a larger 5% region with a large 15% region in yellow there as well, all the way through the Twin Cities and back towards Rapid City, not quite getting there to South Dakota, as we are expecting some widespread wind damage to be possible tomorrow night. Our hail outlook is going to look identical in the Midwest and the northern plains to our wind outlook, where we are expecting those strongest storms to roll through. But you'll notice in the mid-Atlantic and the south, there isn't a hail threat at all. So we're just looking at the Midwest and the northern plains, really from the Twin Cities all the way back through Rapid City, from Minnesota to South Dakota for Tuesday night for hail. As we go towards midweek for Wednesday, there is a lot of the country within this light green general thunderstorm risk. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because the risk for flash flooding is going to be more elevated for Wednesday, as we will have more widespread pop-up summertime storms. And we've already seen a lot of flash flooding happen the last few days, and especially the last week or so, in areas like the southeast into Kentucky and Tennessee, all over the place, really. We've seen tons of flash flooding. And so we're going to see storms all the way from Florida back through potentially through Maine. And then we'll see in the central portion of the country, maybe from Phoenix all the way to Minneapolis, we'll be seeing pop-up thunderstorms. There will be a marginal 1 out of 5 risk for severe weather that is in place from near Denver all the way back through the Twin Cities and into Wisconsin. So definitely the risk for for some severe weather there as well. But the flash flooding risk on Wednesday is definitely my number one concern as of right this second. As we go towards our probabilistic outlook for day 3, which is Wednesday, we are looking at a 5% risk near Denver, all the way back through the Twin Cities and into Wisconsin, even clipping just a sliver of the UP of Michigan. So a widespread area where we could see some severe weather on Wednesday, but I'm not expecting anything too insane as of right this moment. But again, these are kind of more these mesoscale days, so it takes a little bit more time for us to get better confidence in the forecast. It's hard to see these ones a little bit further out, but as we get towards Wednesday, we could see another forecast video that morning associated with Wednesday's severe weather and going forward if we're going to get any more. But things are not looking crazy for Wednesday and as we roll into later this week either. Now, before we get into the timing of today's severe weather and the next couple of days, I just wanted to point out that things are still going to be hot, but we've broken that extremely dangerous heat wave that we've been in with the ridge of fire pattern, and I'll show that in a minute. But you're going to see some of these values getting well into the 100s, back into the northern plains for Bismarck and Billings, as well as in the desert southwest for Phoenix, even closer to LA, getting up to 100 or so. So still going to be pretty hot, temperatures in the 80s and 90s for the entire eastern half of the country as well. So definitely still going to be quite the warm period here over the next week. Getting into the timing of today's severe weather, you are going to see in the afternoon hours in the southeast, I just want to point this out, all of these pop-up storms, that's going to pose the risk for that flash flooding. Even back into the northeast, you're going to see a ton of pop-up storms there as well. This is by 2 p.m. this afternoon. As we go a little bit forward in time, back into Minnesota, you're going to see those storms begin to fire off. The greatest tornado threat for this evening is really going to exist with any of these prefrontal cells that can fire off and remain supercellular and discrete, taking advantage of that environment all to themselves. But we're going to see a squall line is going to form into more of a line and eventually an MCS, that Boeing segment that's going to push down towards the southeast type of deal. So definitely a very strong series of storms into the northern Midwest and plains this afternoon and evening. But you're going to see back even into the south, the mid-Atlantic, even into the northeast, tons of storms are firing off, even out here into the mountains of Idaho and Montana, back towards the Great Basin, where we could see a couple of those dry thunderstorms that produce some damaging winds back in the Great Basin as well, and increase that fire weather risk that we also are seeing down there, as those fires have been going rampant for quite some time now. But really, generally, tons of thunderstorms today, and we're going to have some stronger storms throughout the Dakotas and northern Minnesota, with that stronger segment that's going to continue to push to the southeast as we get into the overnight hours. And here's what that is going to look like as we go into the overnight hours. You're going to see that line finally dissipate by the AM of around 5 a.m. when sun is just starting to peak back over the horizon, with more storms throughout Montana and North Dakota. You're also going to see in the afternoon, more storms are forecast in the Louisiana area. And watch how quickly here around 1 to 2 to 3, and even now by 4 p.m., just tons of storms firing from Dallas all the way to Pittsburgh and New York City. So literally, we're just looking at tons of these pop-up storms. This is pretty normal in the summertime. This is not anything unusual, but it does pose that risk for flash flooding. As we roll into Tuesday evening, where our severe weather risk is going to ramp back up, you're going to see a large line of thunderstorms is going to develop. This is already by 10 p.m. here. So at this point, a lot of our atmosphere has been exerted. But if we go a little bit back in time, what you'll notice is that some of these earlier storms are going to be semi-discrete or fully discrete. You'll see it near the Dakotas region, potentially even to the Nebraska panhandle as well, where we could see some isolated risks for tornadoes or upgraded risks for severe weather in general, especially with wind as we go a little bit further north. But any cells that can remain discrete ahead of the line will pose that greatest risk for tornado potential. But you'll see a little bit of an MCS forming up here near the Dakotas. That's going to pose the risk for some large hail and especially some wind damage, as we've seen a lot of MCS action really over the last 2 weeks or so that have brought some extensive damaging winds, including in South Dakota, that 131 mile per hour wind gust that we'd seen. And we've already seen multiple other gusts above 100 miles per hour as well, even back through Minnesota and towards Michigan. So tons of different areas where we've seen extensive wind damage, and that threat is not going to end with this line, as it's going to roll through into the evening hours Tuesday night. And finally, as we roll through the last couple hours of our forecast period here, as we get to 3 a.m. here on Wednesday, things will be less severe, really non-severe at all, but still a cluster of storms that could be producing up to those 60 mile per hour wind gusts. We could definitely see a little bit of that bowling ball MCS begin to develop, that produces those strong winds into the evening hours like we've seen recently. So still something to watch out for, but in general, the severe weather threat will be pretty limited as we get into the overnight hours into Wednesday. Something to note here is that our ring of fire pattern has been broken. You will see this trough that is available here at 200 millibars. That is going to be driving a little bit of our severe weather risk for the northern plains, as you'll see a lot of diffluence going on here with winds starting to spread in different directions. So diffluence is essentially where winds are just kind of going like this. They're just kind of veeing off in different directions. So that diffluence aloft is going to promote rising motion and aid our severe weather up into Minnesota. But as we roll forward in time here towards Wednesday, what you'll notice is that our upper level flow is really going to become pretty messy in the central part of the country. And that is going to limit our severe weather risk as we go into Wednesday. So it'll take a little bit of time for that atmosphere to recover, but we definitely could see isolated severe weather again in the northern Midwest and northern plains, possibly in the mid-Atlantic, where we definitely have some stronger flow forecasted aloft as well. And this is, again, nothing really unusual for this time of year, but we could see the upper level flow recycle itself a little bit as we are seeing a more robust flow starting to make its way off of the Rockies at the end of our forecast period by Wednesday morning, and that could drive severe weather for later in the week, possibly around Thursday or Friday. I am just going to let our 500 millibar flow just roll through the entire forecast period here. And the reason I'm doing that is just to point out that really the only areas where we're going to have that strong 500 millibar flow is going to be throughout northern Minnesota and North Dakota. You're going to see here by Tuesday night, again, we're just getting into the northern Minnesota and Dakotas region. And that is going to be a primary limiting factor for severe weather for the entire rest of the country. But it will be a promoting factor for severe weather in that green circle. So essentially, that 500 millibar flow is indicative of rising motion, divergence aloft, which is what you need to drive your severe weather. So we do have a little bit of that upper level support present in the northern plains and parts of the northern Midwest as well. And we're lacking it pretty much everywhere else. So that is going to limit our severe weather for the entire country except that area. Looking at our 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity, this is just how much spin the updraft is able to ingest in a storm. What you'll notice this evening is that there really isn't a ton up here in the northern Midwest. You'll see maybe around 8 p.m. you might have some areas where it's definitely possible that we get strong rotating updrafts. Again, the possibility for a tornado is definitely there this evening, but it will be a lot more isolated, because it's going to require a storm to stay fully discrete or at least semi-discrete out ahead of that main line of thunderstorms and that main MCS that's going to be pushing down towards the south. And if no storms are able to do that, then we probably won't have much of any of a tornado threat. But if we do get one in that environment, it's definitely possible that we see a tornado threat develop. And as we roll forward into Tuesday evening, this is kind of why I think Tuesday night is going to be a little bit more of a threat. You are going to see that all of our parameters are going to start to align a little bit better near the Dakota border on Tuesday evening. This is by 8 p.m. here. You're going to see a lot of spin is available at the lowest kilometer of the atmosphere for these storms to ingest that spin and try to get going. I also think we could have a slightly more discrete storm mode Tuesday night as opposed to Monday night. So Tuesday night definitely looking slightly more concerning. And I'm going to keep showing you a few things that are going to continue to further that statement. When we look at our mu cape, this is something that will be available for both forecast periods, both for tonight and tomorrow night, Monday and Tuesday. You are going to see up in this region here at 6 p.m. We're definitely going to have enough instability available. And that's primarily why, especially these red to purple values, this is kind of the reason that we're seeing that elevated risk for those large to giant hailstones being possible this evening. Now, as we roll forward into Tuesday evening, what you'll see is that these values are really going to start to shoot up again, especially in South Dakota and near the Dakotas border, where we're definitely going to see the most instability available. This is by 7 p.m. Tuesday night. And I think that Tuesday night is definitely going to be a stronger event as a result. But again, both tonight and tomorrow night will have that mu cape available. And finally, to hammer all this home, here's our significant tornado parameter, which is not the best thing to look at in the world, but you're going to notice very few values even popping up at all into Minnesota for this evening. So definitely not as much of a tornado producing day. But as we roll forward in time and get to Tuesday evening, you're going to see these values really ramping up, especially again near the border of the Dakotas. And I'll roll through this again. This is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 into 11 p.m., even rolling into Minnesota into the later evening hours here. So definitely a more robust event that is coming Tuesday night. But again, I don't want to rule out anything for this evening. There are just less driving factors for stronger severe weather and tornadoes this evening compared to Tuesday night. And that's going to bring us to the end of today's forecast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be going live Tuesday night, and we'll have another forecast video coming out at some point this week, probably for Wednesday, as we get into a little bit of a different pattern coming up for the end of the week. So definitely make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on so that you don't miss anything and you can stay weather aware. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and trusting WillBrattonWx as your source for weather information. Stay safe out there, and we will see you soon.